Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the completely wild economics of play-to-earn gaming. We are going to explore how blockchain games promised a grand revolution, created massive real-world income for players all over the globe, and then, frankly, totally fractured under the weight of their own design. This is a story of explosive economic booms, devastating busts, and the relentless human drive to somehow turn play into profit. Let's get right into it.
So listen to this quote. In 2021, a 22-year-old in the Philippines was making more money playing Axie Infinity than his parents made in office jobs. I mean, that sounds entirely made up, right? But it's not science fiction, and it wasn't some isolated fluke either. An entire parallel economy literally just materialized almost overnight on Discord servers and mobile payment apps. It fundamentally shifted the financial trajectory for thousands of families in developing nations who suddenly found this completely new way to survive.
$1,000 a month. That was the financial anchor of this entire phenomenon, and people were earning this by playing a mobile video game for just about 3 hours a day. Now, before we even get into defining the exact mechanics of what play to earn actually is, we have to understand the sheer gravity of this income. In many parts of the world, $1,000 a month gives you incredible purchasing power. For a ton of these players, this was absolutely life-changing money. It turned a casual digital pastime into a strict daily necessity.
Okay, let's dive right into this context with Section 1, when play became work.
You see, money actually leaving a video game is not a new idea at all. If we go back to 2004, World of Warcraft gold farming was a literal billion-dollar industry. Players who didn't want to spend hundreds of hours grinding for a digital horse would just pay real money to someone who did. But that system was highly centralized. If the game studio, Blizzard, caught you doing it, you were banned immediately. Because per their terms of service, you didn't legally own any of that gold. Fast forward to 2012, Diablo 3 tries a real money auction house built directly into the game. Well, that completely ruined the actual fun of finding loot and was eventually shut down. But then, in 2021, crypto entered the chat with Axie Infinity. Now, the blockchain didn't suddenly make games more fun, but it added true NFT ownership and instant liquidity to supercharge the whole trend. The developers couldn't just ban you and take your items, and you could sell your digital assets on a crypto exchange 24/7.
Moving right along to our main case study here, Section 2, the Axie Infinity boom.
To really understand this massive boom, we have to look at the core Axie loop and break down the mechanical flow of this digital labor step by step. Step 1, you had to buy a team of 3 Axie NFTs, which are essentially these little digital monster pets. Back in 2021, a starting team cost anywhere from $300 to $1,000 just to start playing. Step 2, you use those Axies to battle other players and complete daily quests to earn an in-game token called SLP. And finally, Step 3, you either use that SLP to breed more Axies, or you cash it out for actual US dollars to pay your rent and buy groceries. That simple, highly repetitive loop was the engine of this entire multi-billion-dollar economy.
But what really fueled that engine was this fascinating dual token model. First, you had SLP, which had an infinite supply. Literally every single time someone won a battle, brand new SLP was minted out of thin air. And then you had AXS, which had a capped, limited supply. Linking player actions directly to this specific tokenomics model built a massive, precarious bubble. Why? Well, basic supply and demand tells us that an infinite supply of something will eventually become worthless. To prevent the price of SLP from crashing to zero, the system constantly needed a wave of new players buying into the game at the bottom to absorb all those tokens being sold off by the older players.
Naturally, entities like Yield Guild Games, or YGG, saw that steep $300 to $1,000 barrier to entry and stepped right in. Most people in the developing nations where this game exploded simply couldn't afford that initial startup cost. So these guilds acted as digital landlords. They raised venture capital, bought up tens of thousands of Axies, and lent them out to players, who they called scholars. In exchange, the guild took a flat 30% cut of the players' daily earnings. They essentially turned the chat app Discord into a massive HR department. It created this totally new, slightly feudal player versus manager dynamic, where the scholars were basically acting as sharecroppers in the digital age. But as you might guess, the math eventually caught up with reality, and the result was a completely devastating crash for the SLP token. Because the supply of SLP was infinite, and there simply weren't enough compelling ways to burn it or spend it inside the game, inflation just spiraled totally out of control. Player growth slowed down, that crucial buying pressure vanished, and the token plummeted from a high of 40 cents down to a fraction of a single penny. A staggering 99.5% drop in value. And, as if the economic collapse of the token wasn't bad enough,
it was immediately followed by an absolute haymaker. $625 million. That is the amount stolen in the massive 2022 Ronin bridge hack. Now, a bridge is essentially the software connecting a game's closed ecosystem to the wider crypto world, which allows players to move their money in and out. Hackers, who were later identified as being orchestrated by North Korea, exploited a vulnerability in this bridge and just drained the funds. This completely shattered whatever player trust was left. I mean, the dual token model was already failing under its own inflationary weight, but this catastrophic hack acted as the absolute death spiral for the first generation of play-to-earn. The stark contrast in reality before and after the crash was brutal. At the peak of the frenzy in 2021, players were grinding out about $15 a day, which was genuinely enough to elevate entire families into the middle class in certain countries. But after the crash, that exact same amount of daily labor yielded roughly 30 cents a day. The dream of playing your way out of poverty completely evaporated. Instead of some digital utopia empowering the working class, the system morphed into a digital sweatshop. Players were just trapped earning pennies for hours of intensely repetitive, mind-numbing labor.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the global digital sweatshop.
So the fractured reality of play-to-earn today, it varies wildly depending on exactly where you live. In the Philippines, the current 2026 gaming earnings of $50 to $150 a month sit well below their local minimum wage. It's a failing wage, basically a side hustle for teenagers at best. But the economic nuance shifts pretty drastically in places like Venezuela. With massive local hyperinflation and a monthly traditional job paying maybe $20, earning $30 to $80 a month in a blockchain game still acts as a vital inflation hedge. Because it's paid out in crypto, it's actually more stable than the local fiat currency, making it literally a matter of survival. Meanwhile, over in Nigeria, incredibly high youth unemployment keeps the model popular. Even though it pays just slightly above the local minimum wage there, young people have the time, and a small, stable digital income absolutely beats having no income at all.
But here's the thing. This global labor market isn't just at the mercy of token prices and game mechanics. It is heavily subject to real-world governments. Take India, for example. Macro policy instantly destroyed the viability of these micro-digital economies. By applying a flat 30% crypto tax on all digital asset gains, plus a 1% tax deducted at source on every single transaction, player earnings were instantly slashed. Think about it. When you were painstakingly grinding for just $5 a day to feed yourself, and complex government taxes drop your actual take-home pay to $3.50, the whole model dies. Real-world policy matters just as much, if not more, than the digital tokenomics. So where do we go from here? Section 4, the future of Web3 gaming.
Right now, we are seeing a massive pivot in the industry. It's shifting away from the concept of play to earn to play and earn. The old model required that steep $300 buy-in, and the monetary earnings were literally the only reason people played. Once the money stopped, the players left. Period. But the new model, championed by current games like Pixels, is completely free to play right out of the gate. The core philosophy now is that it has to be fun first. The earnings? Totally optional. The crucial point is, if the token price drops to zero, the game must still be engaging enough to retain real, traditional players who are actually there for entertainment, rather than just keeping speculators around who are only there for a paycheck.
To pull this off, developers in 2026 are using entirely new mechanics to make sure rewards don't artificially inflate and crash all over again. They're strictly capping NFT assets, so the supply is no longer infinite. They're heavily utilizing what's called sync tokens. This means you actually have to burn or permanently destroy your digital currency for vital in-game actions, like crafting items or upgrading land, which effectively takes that currency out of circulation and balances the economy. They're also moving the fast-paced gameplay off-chain for a smooth user experience, keeping only the high-value items on the blockchain itself. And perhaps most importantly, they're pivoting toward user-generated content. Think the Roblox model. Everyday creators can build and earn, making the whole ecosystem infinitely more sustainable than just relying on a developer to hand out tokens.
Let's connect the dots here, though, and look at the harsh reality of what this space has matured into. Play to earn is no longer the magical passive income dream of 2021. It is gig work. It's the exact digital equivalent of driving for Uber or delivering for DoorDash, just executed with a mouse and keyboard instead of a car. It features highly volatile pay that fluctuates right along with the crypto markets. It offers absolutely zero healthcare or retirement benefits. You have no FDIC protection if a bridge gets hacked and your money vanishes. And as we saw with India, it is fully taxable by global governments who definitely want their cut. Which leaves us with this final burning question. Is play to earn a digital utopia, or is it just the next Uber? The original promise was an entirely new, liberating economy. But what it actually delivered was a new, highly competitive labor market, complete with all the inequality, volatility, and risk that comes with it. It's smaller now for sure, it's more regulated, and it is undeniably a job rather than a game for those who are actually relying on it to survive. But you know what? Maybe that's not a failure. Maybe that is simply what it looks like when a digital economy finally grows up. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope it gave you a whole new perspective on the true cost of digital gold.